Hello, I'm Susan Pincus, and I'm a member of the AAPOR's Heritage Committee. Today I'm here with Mervin Field at his company, Field Research Corporation, and is December 11th, 2002. Mervin Field was born in New Brunswick, New Jersey in 1921, and in 1937, as a student in junior high school in Princeton, New Jersey, he had a chance occurrence with Dr. George Gallup and became infected with the concept and activity of survey research. Merv, tell me about your encounter with Dr. Gallup and your first polling experience, especially the one that you did in school.
Well, it occurred this way. I was walking down Nassau Street in Princeton, New Jersey with a schoolmate who was in scouting, and he said, I want to go up and visit the scoutmaster. We went up this building, second floor of the 5 and 10 store, and it happened to be the Gallup poll. This was 1937. Gallup had started his poll in 1935. And I just became fascinated with the process. We were given a tour of the office, and I saw all the paraphernalia of survey research at that time. There were questionnaires, card counting sorters, key punch machines, people percentaging on slide rules, and there were copies of reports. And I just became infected with the whole idea, and it was most memorable because I can almost recite all the things that happened. And I was so imbued with the process. I went back to high school, and I was the campaign manager for someone running for class president. So I thought I would do a survey of his chances, and I did all the interviewing. And I can tell you the results. The results did not correspond to what I thought they were, and as what I found out was that I made the mistake of combining campaign managing with poll taking, and I've learned that lesson, and I haven't done it again since.
That was interesting, though, that as a junior high or high school student, that the Gallup organization took an interest in you and your friend to show you around the company.
Well, what it was, the individual was working for the Gallup poll, Jack Maloney, and he took us around, saw all the different activities, also introduced me to Gallup himself, you see, and he was a very charismatic man, and that's how I got introduced.
That's really interesting. So Dr. Gallup was your mentor?
Well, I think he was everybody's mentor. He happened to be a very nice guy. He was a champion of me. He helped during the war. When I was in the Merchant Marine, I would get materials from the Gallup poll and Opinion Research Corporation. Then after the war, when I set up shop, he gave me a very strong letter of reference, and that was very important.
To step back a little bit from that, in your vitae, you said that you attended night college at Rutgers University for a few months, and you later got a few credits at the University of Missouri, and this is going back to 1939, 1940. And in 1941 and in 1942, you said you worked for the Opinion Research Corporation and the Gallup poll in various capacities, and again, during World War II, you were in the Merchant Marines. You are one of the few successful researchers who has advanced in the field without the benefit of a college education or long formal training. How do you describe yourself in this regard?
Well, it was something that I felt keenly about for a long time, and felt, let's say, not measuring up. And I remember after starting my company in California, I had to handle this issue of the lack of college, and although since I did have a few credits, in the opening line of a paragraph I just shortened it to saying, in addition to college, and then I went on to cite the other things. And the way I have handled it over the years is that at one time I would describe myself, I've worked as an interviewer, as a supervisor, as a coder, as a percentager, a data processor, and also a summary of data. And then I became an empiricist. And then later I discovered the term, which I now describe myself as an autodidact, someone who's completely self-taught.
Well, you should be very proud of yourself. I mean, look at what you've done. You've built up a wonderful organization, very reputable, credible throughout the United States and especially in California. You are the founder of Field Research Corporation. I think that was back in 1946, and the very well-established Field Poll. In the beginning, what kinds of research did you do? How was your sample picked? What kind of clients did you get? How did you get your clients in California? I also read in your biography that the corporations or companies out in the West were pretty hesitant in doing this kind of public opinion research.
Well, before World War II, I worked for Opinion Research Corporation, and then had this stint with the Gallup poll in Canada. And I knew that I wanted to do research, and during the war, when I was in the Merchant Marine, I went on a course of self-study, read everything I could about sampling, questionnaire construction, other texts, and the people at Opinion Research Corporation and the Gallup poll and others would send me stuff. And so I had, I would say, well, it wasn't exhaustive and self-study. It was one I maintained a considerable interest during the war, and learned a lot. And that at that time, I decided after the war I was going to come to California and to set up shop. And I had a basic idea. I wanted to do a general practice, market and opinion research, the way Opinion Research Corporation and Gallup and others had done in the East. And I also wanted to start a state poll. There were other state polls operating at that time, and chief among that was Joe Belden, who had started the Texas poll before World War II, and he was really the granddaddy of state polls. The Minnesota and Iowa polls started in 1944. They operated on the basis of staff operation. It was a major newspaper in each state operating the poll and publishing the results. But Joe Belden's Texas poll was the model that I tried to follow, and got a lot of help from Joe Belden in that he started the Texas poll and syndicated the service to a variety of Texas newspapers. And that's the model I followed with the California poll.
So what were some of your earlier clients, and what kind of research did you do for them?
Well, when I set up shop, actually it was December 45, it was a struggle because the concept of survey research was not well understood, and it was a novelty. The reaction of prospective clients was, how can you go out and take this microscopic sample and generalize to a larger public? And so it was tough, and it was tough first because it was not accepted, and also, to be truthful, I may not have been the best research salesman. I was energetic and I persevered, but some of the earlier work, first major, so-called major client was a furnace manufacturer, and I did a lot of work there, discovered that at the LA City Hall there were permits taken out by furnace manufacturers, and I developed this furnace audit. I then did some work for General Petroleum. The advertising agencies were reasonably good clients in that they didn't have research directors, and their New York offices had research directors, but they didn't have them in Los Angeles, and so they would hire me on an ad hoc basis to do some research for their clients. And so little by little, I made some progress and was able to feed myself. I must say, though, I had to take a job at night in a gas station in order to be sure I still was in some beans.
So you were pumping gas?
That's it, pumping gas.
And how much was gas back in 1945?
Let's see. That's a good point. Let's see. I think no, it wasn't. See, 6 gallons for $1 was in 1941. But I think it was in the low 30 or 40 cents a gallon or something like that. Oh, it was in California. It was always a little higher. That's about what it was then.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now it's $1.73, $1.80.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So what kind of samples did you have? Were they face to face or? quota systems, or what did you do back then?
Well, the work that I was doing for clients might be special groups. For example, homeowners in a tract, or car drivers, or in that type. And basically, the sampling method was very purposive. There would be quota sampling. While there had been some work and during the war on probability sampling, that was not generally used. The interviewing method was virtually all personal interviewing, face-to-face interviewing, and that was the method used prior to World War II and for a long time after World War II. It wasn't until sometime in the late 1950s where the industry and the research community adopted the idea of utilizing the telephone method, and that was because the telephone incidents became much wider. Unlike 1936, when I think only about 40% of the people had telephones, but as it got up into the 70s, 80s, and 90% now, it became a very useful tool.
There was also something else that I read. It was an award, one of the first awards that you won in 1956 for your Field Index of Advertising Efficiency. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, I don't think it's that memorable. It was given to me by the local chapter of the AMA. This is where I had one of the activities I had started was the continuing study of newspaper advertising. And this was a service that was provided for clients and newspapers. And we would do one study a month of a newspaper, and basically we would take the newspaper out. The newspaper was a questionnaire. We would get into the home. We'd get someone who acknowledged reading it that day, and we would go through page by page of the newspaper. And I must say that it was an adaptation of Daniel Starch's reading and noting technique, which he had used in magazines and other publication. And it wasn't, as I look back now, while it was a good, steady source of income, it wasn't that big a deal.
But you were the first, so
well,
maybe Starch took it from you.
That's not the case.
No.
Oh.
How has research or public opinion changed since the beginning of your start in this business?
Well, let's see. That's a long period. It goes. See, it's now been 61 years when I allegedly entered the field. And I guess the changes, if I look at it one way, the changes would be in the way survey research is seen by the public. At the start, when I started interviewing in 1941, it was a novelty, but it was a novelty where whatever door I knocked on, I would have access. And now the idea, I could knock on a door and somebody would yell, and "It's door's open, come on in," without even looking at me. And imagine that in these days.
Right.
And where you'd go in, and people would be a little befuddled about the idea of being interviewed. But once you explained to them what was going on, they would sit still. Then the big problem was getting away from them. They just wanted to continue on talking. They wanted to call other family members in to say, "Look what's going on." So here you had this, while it was a novelty, once it was understood, wholesale acceptance of it. Now we go through the problems in getting good samples, the long controversy of how best to pick a sample, quota versus probability sample. Then we start moving to the situation of where the system starts getting overloaded, of where more and more people doing research. It used to be people would say, "I've never been interviewed." And now they're saying, "Not another interview," when the call comes in. So over the 60 years, we've had many changes, and we're now facing a lot of problems. and one where the research method, while it's just, well, I would say it's wholesalely accepted, it has a lot of problems, a lot of critics, and the researchers of today and tomorrow are going to face entirely different kinds of problems than the alleged pioneers or the semi-pioneers found early on.
And do you mean by that with the lower response rates or the internet, the advent of the internet being put forward into research now? Maybe the different kinds of companies that are doing polling, some may not be as reliable as others, and so they're all put into the same group, the same group?
Well, let's see. Let's take the problem of access. As I mentioned, 60 years ago, we could reach 80, 85, or 90% of the public. And now we're lucky with a telephone, and it's not face-to-face, maybe 40 or 50%. It will depend on the type of study with different publics. But when you talk about the general public samples, where you're now relying on these random calls, it's very difficult because the public now is being besieged by all sorts of calls, all sorts of interventions during the time they're home. And when you just limit it to the legitimate surveys, we have the problem of the questionnaires are long, people are concerned about privacy, they are called a lot. And then for many years, recent years, we've had to face the problem of telemarketing. The telemarketing at first we're using, unfortunately, and I would say in a scurrilous way, disguising telemarketing in a survey approach. That contaminated the field for researchers. Now the telemarketing industry, as I understand it, are trying to clean up the act, and they have to some extent. But now we have these new mechanical devices of robocalls where the public now is, where the phone will ring, and because somebody at the central office in the telemarketing firm is automatically dialing 6 people and will pick up the phone for the first answer, people now, the other 5 are getting calls and getting a little frustrated by that. And so the public still has a problem separating legitimate surveys from telemarketing. And so I would say that the problem of low response rate is very serious because it gets at the whole basic idea of sampling. And one of the canons of discipline, or one of the canons is that we should reach the people we draw. And we're now having to do a lot of substituting. And that's a real problem.
Can you tell me a little bit about what made you decide to move to California? I mean, I'm stepping back a little because I want to get some history from you and put your career in some kind of context. What made you decide to move to California? And you say that you modeled the California or the field poll after Joe Belden's Texas poll. But why did you even think about coming up with something like that for the state of California? Because it has been something that the elected officials look at, academics look at, and it's something that's really revered as a public service to the people of California. So why did you even think that there was something that you should be doing?
Well, it all goes back to the original infection with, in 1937, the idea of public opinion research. Fortunately, I was living in Princeton, New Jersey, which was the center of research. There was Gallup, Claude Robinson, Archibald Crosley, Cantrell, and they're all offshoots of research there. So it was just lucky that I was in that town. I said, apparently, I often said, if it weren't for the research industry, I might have gone to work for the University Laundry. But anyway, I got infected with the idea, and all during the war, when I was studying, getting this material from the different research companies and studying the process, I knew I was going to go back to work in the research industry for researchers. And in 1944, when I was in the Merchant Marine, coming back from the South Pacific after we had delivered some troops to New Guinea, and the truth of the matter is I did on the ship there was a lot of poker and dice going on, and I got very lucky. So lucky that I was not only winning money, but also lending money to my shipmates, and they were losing, so I would get leave time. So I came into San Francisco in 1944, my pockets full of money, and I had a week's a leave time, which I had accumulated. I didn't have to stand a watch for a week. And I went and partied around the clock in San Francisco, came back aboard, and said, this is a great place to live. There are people who live and work in this town. I'm coming back to California. So coming back to California was promulgated by that marvelous experience, along with my long-held desire to get into the research business.
And then what made you decide, I mean, I understand your desire to go into the research business, but how did you even think about just doing a California poll about the issues affecting California?
Well, see, again, it goes back to what occurred in Princeton, New Jersey. There was the Gallup poll. There was Opinion Research Corporation. There were the two firms that were doing this work nationally. Prior to World War II, the bug of operating a poll occurred. I had a friend, Tom Peacock, back at Opinion Research Corporation, and we thought we would start a local poll for the Trenton Times, this newspaper, and we called it the Tomer poll, T-O-M-E-R, Tom for Tom and Mer for Merv. We tried to sell that, and we didn't get by with that. So that when I came to California, the two ideas: first of all, I wanted to make a living. I felt you made a living by doing commercial research, but I also wanted to do polling. I was fascinated by polling, still fascinated by it, and so the idea of starting a commercial general practice consumer opinion research agency was motivated by the desire to earn a living. I recognized that running a state poll, it would be limited in respect to possible revenue sources, unlike a national poll, which you can do one national poll, with and the cost of 1,000 or 1,500 interviews. You'd have to do the same number in any one state, but the revenue possibilities were much more limited. So I knew that I would not be able to earn a living running the poll, but I had hoped that maybe it would break even. And I thought that the poll, doing a poll on a statewide basis, would be a demonstration of survey research in action. If I could do surveys on public policy issues that might help state governments or the other issues, then also I thought in respect to demonstrating the validity of the method, as Gallup and all the others were doing, is to engage in pre-election polling and show the people how people are making up their minds, the dynamics of election, doing it on a trend basis, and that this would be a good, as I say, a good model, a good demonstration of the survey research method that would get attention, and hopefully the kinds of attention from business people that would say, this is a great method, let's apply it to my business activities.
And how many of them do you do a year? Is it 4 a year?
It depends. On off election years, we do 4 statewide surveys, sometimes a few more. During election season, so it would be 6 or 7 surveys.
And it's all the subscribers to this poll are the media?
Yeah, the funds that we get for the poll come from media. Also now, we've had a long association with the colleges and universities, both the UC system and the CSU system, where we turn over all our data to them. We started that in 1956. And fortunately, some years ago, we were able to get the universities to give us some funds for that.
Oh, great.
So the two together, and then we can occasionally, on some of our surveys, deal with some public policy issues. And I would say, financially, the poll has always been a struggle. It's been a lost leader in a way. There were periods where may have been with some beneficial cost accounting, it may have broken even, but it's still a financial struggle.
But don't you think it's worth it, though, right? It is a public service.
Well, I think it's worth it, and the director of the poll, Mark DiCamillo, who joined me in 25 years ago, who fortunately for me, for the poll, and for Field Research Corp, he is one of the outstanding researchers, one who's a solid methodologist, and one that there are very few of them like that in the country, who are really interested in doing research, doing it right, and know what they're doing.
I agree. I like Mark too. So, how far back does your polling go? It goes back to this California poll.
Yeah.
It goes back to 1945, 46?
No, I started planning the California poll, which subsequently became the Field poll, just the naming, but for a long while, even as it was California poll, they were referring to it Field poll, and we made that the official title many years ago.
What, Field poll?
Yeah, Field poll. So that we were planning that in 1946, and our first poll was in 1947. And during 1946 and 47, the big problem was to get newspaper subscribers. And I went around the state, and we had a schedule of costs based on newspaper circulation, ranging anywhere, and with the idea that we could provide one report a week on some topic. Well, we would do one survey, maybe get 7, 8, 9, 10 topics, but we'd have one report a week, and it would cost the newspaper anywhere from $5 to $25. But I found out none of them would want to sign up on a year basis, and the only way that I could get it sold was for them to take it on a pay-if-you-use basis. And so that is, we'd send them the reports by mail, and then at the end of the month, we would send an invoice and to check off the ones that they used, and based on their admission that they had used some reports or not, this is how we were getting funds. And at one time there were about as many as 40 newspapers on that basis, but it got down to about 18 or 20. Now the list is smaller, and we are on a much different basis. We're on an annual contract basis.
So how many subscribe to your poll now? About 8 or 10?
10, yes.
And that's throughout the state of California?
Yes.
So the universities have your archival polling back to 1947? Or
1956.
From 1956?
They can get some data prior to that, but the data that can be retrieved is from 56. Yeah.
That's a great source of information, especially
yes.
to the elected officials, public officials.
I think where I get a lot of gratification for that is that during the last 45 years, the material that we've deposited at UC Berkeley and the California State University system has been used, and it's been used by, I think now, I don't think it's an overstatement, by thousands of students and scholars. And I still, and frequently, will get people come up to me. They're in law, they're in business, they're in some other activity, and they say, you know what? I was using your data when I was taking an undergraduate or graduate course at Berkeley or some other university, and I got a lot out of it. My first introduction to survey research was looking at your questionnaires and your data, and so that's most gratifying.
That's great. So it's free to all the students in the systems?
Yes.
And where they can get it through the library or through?
Well, it's online, and there's a system, and where
I think that's great. That's really good. You know, it's also interesting reading the information that you gave me. Could you talk about your polling during the presidential election of Truman versus Dewey? It shows that you have to be faithful to your data and to believe in your data.
Yeah. Well, the 1948 presidential election was the first big test for the California Field poll. At that time, I had I had a partner, Tom Peacock, who worked with me at Opinion Research Corporation, and we were in Los Angeles at the time. And the 48 election, for those, I'm sure, the people who know the history, but very simply, it was a case of where, unlike today, there was no tension during the campaign. Everybody believed that Governor Thomas E. Dewey was going to win the presidency, that incumbent Democrat Harry Truman was going to lose. He was going to lose because he was unpopular. He was going to lose because Strom Thurmond was going to take away the southern states. Mm-hmm. Henry Wallace was going to take away a lot of Democratic votes in the other states. And there wasn't much tension. The national polls had relied on what had happened in 36, 40, and 44. There was not much change after the nominating conventions, and they didn't do frequent polling. They all believed that Dewey was going to win. Not only the polls were showing Dewey ahead, but every commentator, every county chairman, and the whole belief system was that Dewey was going to win. Well, the field poll, we had done 3 surveys before, and it showed Dewey, the last one had shown Dewey about 8 points ahead. And our last poll was done in October of 1948. At that time, we were doing a personal interviewing, and the whole system then was that we had to get the questionnaires out to the resident interviewers in California, and then get them back, tabulate it by the Thursday before the Tuesday election, and so that the newspapers could have it for Monday publication. So basically, the interview...
the Monday before the election?
Monday before the Tuesday election. So that you had this long period of delay. But anyway, on the Thursday night when we had to file, the Thursday before the Tuesday election, where we had to file this report, we were... Then Tom Peacock and I were doing everything. We were coding the questionnaires, doing the key punching, doing the card counting sorter, and then what we found, to our confounded amazement, was that Truman and Dewey were dead even, 47.5%. Now, in that milieu, if you were anybody, you were any kind of person following it, you felt something was wrong. No one could conceivably believe that Truman was dead even with Tom Dewey in California or anywhere else. So our whole belief system was that we made a mistake somewhere. Where was the mistake? Well, we went through the normal steps of checking the key punching, checking other things. And at that time, there was a phenomenon the research industry had to worry about, still worry about to some extent. That is, interviewers not fulfilling procedures or instructions, and so-called interviewer cheating. You say, were we a victim of that? So at that time, while you couldn't guarantee that there was no cheating, or there was, you could look at some questionnaires to see whether some patterns. And we didn't see any evidence of cheating. So we felt there must have been some mistakes. What kind of mistakes did they make? We had done a sample of 500, again, getting the 47.5%. And we're looking for inconsistencies. Here would be somebody who had voted for Tom Dewey in 44, a conservative Republican, had said nice things about Dewey, but the Truman box was checked. The interviewer made a mistake. So we found about 25 or 30 of those are possibilities, and we were being as systematic as we thought and as honest as we thought, because there's just in our mind, this was a bad poll, something was wrong, we had to correct it. So we found 12 questionnaires to our mind that had been marked for Truman, and we thought that they should have been Dewey. We made that change. We released a report showing Dewey at 50%, Truman at 45%. We sent it to the editors. All the calls that we got from the editors on Monday, how could you have Dewey only 5 points ahead when we know he's going to win in a walk? Anyway, what had happened on Election Day, Truman won by about 4/10% ahead of Dewey. It was a close election. It happened that our data was correct before our maladjustments. Now we knew what we were doing. Now in that light, it was unprofessional and horribly unprofessional. But at that time, we didn't think that we were doing something like that. So what had happened? Now, coincidentally, on election day, while we had this partnership in Los Angeles, I was going to open up an office in San Francisco. I was driving up on election day, listening to the radio, and late in the evening started getting the reports from the East and all this misgivings that something was going on, that Dewey was not winning overwhelmingly, because California reports weren't coming in yet. I went into a cheap motel. They had no radio. This is election day '48, no radio. I had to go out, find a drugstore open, or some store, a hardware store, that had a radio, and I remember bought this one radio, small table radio, which I had for 30 years after. I don't know what ever happened. We moved. But anyway, and then hearing this painful data that it was very close that night, and that it was going, and that then what happened, because I had moved up from L.A. to San Francisco, I had lined up all these appointments with business people with the whole idea of showing how this marvelous survey research tool can be used in business. Also, I was calling on the San Francisco Chronicle and other papers to get them to get in the poll, and my mind was to try to cancel all those appointments, but from their standpoint, they all wanted to hear a live pollster to try to explain how could they make this kind of mistake. And all I could tell them is exactly what happened, it was the technique was okay, but the technicians committed a horrible error, a horrible unprofessional error, changed the data when they shouldn't have, did not believe the data, and showed how the raw data did show that this race was very even, as it turned out to be. It was a way of demonstrating that the method was very good. And I must have had 75, 100 meetings in the year of 49 explaining this. And rather than being an event that might possibly demolish the pollsters and the firm, it became a boon, because I was called upon to describe this, and was able to get clients and to show some progress in business.
So what did you learn from that little lesson?
Well, I learned it was a big lesson. What I learned is that you got to believe the data. You see, now sure, mistakes are going to occur, but you've got to be systematic. We thought we were being systematic, but we know that what you recognize that the polling is very fragile. You want to be careful of any subjective interventions. You've got to have certain kinds of procedures. And I would say since that time, if I may say, Mark D. Camilla and I, over the years, there are many times when we look at something that would run counter to what the belief was, or what previous polls or other polls are showed. And we'd look at it, but we'd check our data, we would make sure that it was right. And even though the external atmosphere was that this is different than what people expect, we would still publish it. And and at least I was inoculated with the idea that you don't do that as a result of the 48 episode.
But it was also the beginning of polling, and so I guess mistakes had to be made in order for polling to move forward.
Well, there are certain kinds of mistakes. No, the mistake. No, see, what was unreal? Here was sure. What might have happened if you didn't have two candidates that were even, and then the whole idea that you wanted. See, our idea was not to find all the mistakes. We were just very limited. We just looked at the questionnaires that Truman had. We didn't look at to apply the same business for Dewey, because our belief was whole belief.
Right. The hypothesis was
that type of thing was hypothesis. So that that was a unique occasion, and I would say it's a good inoculation to get early in the campaign. You see, and I think and it was a vivid, memorable, and it turns out, beneficial lesson.
Now, you've done exit polling in the state of California, but you don't do it anymore. Is there a reason why you don't do it?
Well, we can't get funding. No.
Yes, that does help.
We can't get funding. And if I may say, it's too bad in the 2002 election that Voter News Services weren't able to publish the demographic data from their national sample, because exit polls are very important and providing kinds of data that are very rich and usable. And it's too bad that the networks rely on the exit polls to make fast counts that night. It would be nice if just newspapers would do the exit polls for their next day publication, so that they can get good data. They have time to be sure that they're getting reliable data, and not as it is now with the TV stations going through this breathless race of telling people on election night who's won, who's not won. I think the public could wait 2 or 3 hours for it.
I agree with you. How do you see the future of public opinion or survey research?
Well, there are two aspects. One, I think there are some bright aspects. The bright aspects are that polling and survey research is being used more widely. It's got a lot of acceptance, and maybe sometimes uncritical acceptance, which is not good. But it's a big future. It's going to be bigger in future years than it is now. More people are going to be involved in it. More people who are well trained. The colleges and universities have now courses of study. There's now thousands of different opportunities for people interested in research, either in research agencies or working for business, to ply the trade of survey research. And that's the good part. The bad part is that the fundamental principles on which survey research is based, that is, you can draw a sample, 1,000, 500, 10,000, and that you can reach. If you reach those people, then you can generalize to a larger public. The big problem is that we're less and less able to reach everybody that we want to reach. So we have to substitute. So we have the system where we have 1,000 sample. We have ways of calculating error that everybody accepts if you reach that 1,000. Mm-hmm. But what happens, we don't reach that 1,000. People are turning us off for a variety of reasons. They're either not at home, they're fearful, there are these competitive forces that are ringing people, relying on telephone, and so some people who, when their lifestyles are that they're not at home at different times of the day, they're important people. If they're not back into the sample, we have biased samples. And so the big problem of getting adequate retrieval rate is now relating to a broader problem. That is, we have to see just how serious it is of not being able to reach everybody we want to reach. I think all of us are relying on so-called excuse, well, the system is so robust that even if we get 40 or 50% retrieval rate, that we really got some good data. Well, maybe we got good data, we got better data than if we hadn't done that, and if we made some allowances. But I would say that the whole basic premise of survey research is being challenged because the inability to implement the surveys as we know they should be done and as we would like them to be done.
And apart from the problem of the declining response rates, what are some other problems that you see facing the research community?
One of the long-standing problems in the field is that political pollsters have so much visibility, and if I may say, many of them are a different breed of people. And I'm a political pollster and a survey researcher, and probably wear twin hats. But what's occurring is that the political polling is the tail that's wagging the dog of survey research. And it's still a case of because political polling gets a lot of visibility in elections. There are now more and more people doing polling, and I would say that have varying degrees of experience. Some are good, some are not. But what happens during election season, they get very busy. In non-election seasons, or maybe early part of the election season, they have small staffs. But toward the end, where the newspapers and TV stations want to get some polling reports, these small shops get expanded, and perhaps without the kind of level of competence at the interview level, supervisory level, and data is being retrieved that's questionable, it gets published. And as witness this past election and previous elections, when you have political polling failure, that raises a lot of criticism. It carries over to all the other research that business, government is doing, and it puts the survey research in a bad light. And I think what's needed is some way of separating the political polling with the survey research in the eyes of the public. In respect to pre-election polling, there's a whole new set of problems. Maybe not new, but they've been in existence for some time. And one problem is the fact that newspapers, TV stations, are hiring polls without really checking into the background of the pollsters. And they just believe that if they go out and take 1,000 interviews or 600 interviews or whatever, they can report it, and things add up to 100%, and maybe they're on target, maybe they're not. But what's happening is that when you get, as it happened in 2002 and previous elections, where you get so much attention to what's going on in the different states, and where you have the situation of some of the polls showing one candidate ahead by 6 or 7 points, and at the same time another poll showing the opposing candidate 6 or 7 points ahead. And that's not good for polling, and that's just the media polling where it's going, and I think that's on the basis of people, there are a lot of people doing polling that are not following the rigors of good polling. But for the, let's say, the pollsters who are trying to do a good job and are working for media, one of the complicating problems they have is that now there's so much private polling being done by candidates, and where the whole idea of the private pollster is that they want to make the candidate look good. And they do that by a variety of ways. They do it by the kinds of questions which are simulating what might happen. They're not really reliable and objective measures of what's going on. But the whole idea of this private pollster working for a campaign is to make the candidate look good. They will leak stuff that they say this is what we're showing, will not show all the procedures of what a professional media pollster might do, and try to use these distorted findings in a way of spinning the reporters. And so the professional media pollsters have this problem where they will publish the field poll, and other polls will, the LA Times, others polls will publish a poll which will run counter to what these so-called private polls are showing. And then you get into this controversy, and you get into this unusual discussion and heat that's unnecessary. But the sum of it is that then what the press and reporters see, that these spinmeisters who are just showing either selective findings or findings based on convoluted questions. If you knew so-and-so that someone had this unsavory aspect in his career, would you still vote for him? So they say no, and so they have a preference measure based on that very loaded question. That's a gross example, but there's now examples that may be a little more sophisticated than that. But still, it's unreliable data, and all that stuff is out there and contaminating the process.
Yes, that is a very that is one of the hardest things that reputable pollsters have to fight against. Do you think it's AAPOR's mission to teach what's considered a good and a bad poll, or should they be more aggressive in censoring polls that are out there that are not good, that are using inaccurate ways of polling?
Well, the issue of what AAPOR should do in respect to so-called policing the industry has been one of the problems that AAPOR has faced ever since its inception. I joined AAPOR in 1951, and I think I've only missed 2 or 3 conferences in that long period. And over the years, AAPOR has tried to face up the problem how to police some of these bad practices in survey research. And we've had problems. I was on the standards committee for a number of years, and I was chairman of it for a while. And we found that since we're based on individuals, if we got too aggressive in respect to policing, that is, having so-called having certain kinds of standards that people had to follow, that would be a problem. So what AAPOR in essence has done, and I think wisely, is to say, all right, here are some principles. AAPOR has promulgated some principles on what's good and bad survey research. Then anybody doing research should reveal what they've done, so that the reader, the investigator, can look at what the professionals in AAPOR have said and what this one individual or what this one research agency has done, so they can make a comparison. And AAPOR has done a very good job in that. See, over the years, even getting these researchers to reveal their findings has been difficult. And now we've got to the situation if someone has done some survey research and is being challenged, and if they're not ready to reveal what they've done, not ready to reveal the questionnaire, not ready to reveal their tabulations, not ready to reveal their weightings, they're suspect. And so for good reason. So I think any conscientious researcher who goes out and takes surveys and talks to the public. See, the public is involved in this. See, it's a good faith effort. When I try to select a respondent and they talk to me, they're part of the system, and we have to be square with them. So that's been a good thing, and I think AAPOR needs to do more of that, and they're doing it, you see, and that's helping. Now, there's another organization, the National Council of Public Polls, that of pollsters that have, in their charter and their activities, are becoming a little more aggressive. That is, when a poll comes out that doesn't meet the standards and the ethical principles of and the code of ethics that the National Council of Public Polls has, there's a committee, polling review committee, or the president of the association will make public statements. So, and to immediately alert the public that this particular poll is not measuring up. And I think that's the best way to do it. If you try to start licensing pollsters and doing things like that, you get into a real thorny thicket that I think, and then lawsuits and kinds of things. And I think complete disclosure, public disclosure, acquainting the public and users of what good and bad research is the best way to go.
What kind of grade would you give AAPOR in the development of public opinion research?
Well, I'd give AAPOR an incredibly high grade. It's just that AAPOR has been a marvelous institution. And what's good and remarkable about AAPOR is the way it was originally constituted, the way they have maintained, I would say, the right kinds of principles, They've avoided taking tacks that I think would have undermined the strength of the association, and the fact that there's now the membership, I think, is approximately 1,500. There's just a nice balance between academic, government, and commercial researchers. And as I look at the roster, and as I when I attend conferences and mingle with them, I see all these people that there's a small segment, my group, that have been there for a long time. That's, you would expect, declining, but the whole figure is coming from people who have joined in the last 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, 5 years, even 1 or 2 years, and there's the future of AAPOR is great. And I think the fact, for one example, that AAPOR has AAPORnet, where all the members can now have this universal chat room, and I could see where researchers could put out a clarion call for, has anyone encountered this kind of problem doing survey research? I'm encountering it, please let me know. And you see that they immediately get 10 answers from people who have the experience and the talent to advise, and it's a marvelous thing. And so AAPOR, as an association, it's unique in that it's unlike a lot of other associations. Unique in that at conferences there's a big intermingling of different kinds of specialties, different people with different experiences, and it's very substantive, joyful learning activity.
Merv, one last question. You've been great. What has been the most satisfying aspects of your research career?
The most satisfying thing to me has been that the hope that I had when I started, and has materialized. That is, I've been able to do research, still doing research, still get a delight of constructing a questionnaire or analyzing data, or looking at data printouts and being able to spot some inconsistency, and I still get that personal joy. In a larger sense, the gratification, the joy I have, is that things have worked out well. I wanted to start a general practice research company that did good research. Very fortunate in having all sorts of good people join the company and make great contributions and stay with the company for a long time and ply their trade and their activity there, and to get the reputation among the business community that we have. On the polling side, at the time, to have the field poll become as important as it is, when one particular event happened, the California Journal a couple of years ago, in looking at the 30 people that had made a contribution to state government and public policy, I was selected because of the field poll, a unique state poll, had been publishing more than 2,000 reports on a variety of issues that really explained California to the legislature, to other people, and to getting that kind of recognition.
Just to tell you a little bit about Merv, he's won numerous awards from the American Marketing Association, and in 1976, the award for Exceptionally Distinguished Achievement from AAPOR. The citation accompanying the award said in part, "Mr. Field has been the chief architect of and a successful campaigner for a contemporary code of standards for public opinion research. He is a model for the businessman in research, a distinguished political analyst, and a conscience of a profession." Mark DiCamillo, Senior Vice President of Field Research Corporation and Director of the Field Poll, concurs with the award and says that when he thinks of Merv, he thinks of his high ethical standards, and this is conveyed in his polling practice and in the way he conducts business. He was also awarded an honorary degree of Doctor of Laws by the Board of Trustees of the California State University in 1996. The California Journal, in its 1999 issue marking the 30th anniversary, as Merv said, selected 30 men and women who had the greatest influence on California government and politics in the 20th century. In its selection of Mr. Field, the Journal said, over the past half-century, Field and his poll have defined California politics. He has been the man who explained California to one another and the nation. And in 2002, he was appointed a Regents Professor at UC Berkeley. You must be very proud of your achievements, Merv, and the profession is very proud to have you as part of their profession. Thank you.